I'm Andrew Henderson, and today I'm going to answer all your questions on how you can move overseas and live like a king. I've been living and traveling overseas for a long, long time, both as a nomad and someone who has bases around the world. And so we actually created a video series called Live Like a King, where the goal was to dispel the common notions people have about the places that I live. I happen to like living in places that are a bit up and coming. It's interesting to see what's changing in the world. It's interesting to be part of countries that are growing quickly, where buildings are going up, stuff is happening. I like watching the world evolve in front of my very eyes. And it was never, at least for a long time for me, about getting a cheap deal. It was about the excitement of living in places that were a bit more flexible, that didn't have so many rules just for the sake of rules, and where I could actually go and watch the world unfold and see the opportunities that a lot of people where I'm from didn't see. And yet the challenge is in the places that we've often talked about. Countries that we've talked about include Malaysia, Georgia, Colombia. We've talked a bit more about Venezuela recently, Mexico, countries like that. People often think, well, do they even have electricity in those places? And so the idea behind the series Live Like a King was that I go to the places that you may have never heard of, or you may imagine, hey, how good could life be in Malaysia? What do they have going on over there? And we show you, not only do they have electricity, not only do they have the internet, but they have caviar and champagne and beautiful women, and yes, even a taste of home. And so today I'm going to answer your questions on what Live Like a King is all about. So the first question is, do you really live like this every day? Because you'll see in Live Like a King, it is champagne, it is caviar, it is a bit over the top at times. And the answer is no, I don't live like that every day. The goal is to show you, here's how you can live. I remember there was a guy at a burrito shop, I forget where this was, somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he got a little pissy with me, and I responded a little bit in kind, and he's like, you're a loser, you're eating a burrito. Like, everyone here is a loser. Like, if you're eating burritos, you don't have any money. And I thought to myself, Michael Bloomberg, like him or hate him, was the mayor of New York City. The guy has like $60 billion at the time. And he eats at a hot dog cart on the street. And then he goes and takes the subway. To me, Live Like a King is not only about the stuff we talk about here on our channel, where, yeah, you have the ability to have more personal freedom. You have greater control over the tax rate that you pay, and you're not being squeezed for half your income. You have peace of mind in that way. But it's also about having options. And I think anyone who's living like a king in the honest sense of the world, not who's showing off, not who's trying to act a fool, is doing champagne and caviar sometimes. They like that that's available to them. And sometimes they're having a hot dog on the street. Sometimes they're ordering a burrito to be delivered to the house. And I think you can live like a king or a queen and have both of those. So what is live like a king not? Because I think that word king has been co-opted at times by people who are a bit different than I am. I like to keep things a little classy. And what I don't like, I remember we went to Medellin, Colombia. And I've told this story once or twice before. We were looking at properties for sale, and the agent said, hey, this is 10 years ago at this point. This property, you can't do Airbnb because the board voted to ban Airbnb when a mother and her young child pushed the button, the elevator door opens, and there's a guy getting taken care of in the elevator. And they said, we don't want these kind of people here. And I think some people have this assumption that king is like, we're the kings, we're coming, you know, we're taking over, we're going to sleep with all your women. And no, it's how do I live a nice lifestyle to where, again, I have flexibility, I have options. But I know, in a way that I think a lot of people in the Western world don't know, we know we can go to a lot of places in the world. If you want the finest steak dinner, if you want caviar, if you want the best fresh sushi, if you want all these things, you can have them. Whether you want it every day, every other day, once a month, once a year for a treat, you don't have to worry. It could be, is there availability of shopping? Because people think, hey, how am I going to get my stuff? Am I going to have a nice TV? Am I going to have nice clothing? Where do I go when my skincare runs out? Whatever Live Like a King is to you, it's about showing you have that availability and dispelling this idea of kind of the Soviet era breadline that I think a lot of people, whether you believe it or not, actually think still exists in these countries around the world. It's a lot of places you can live better than the US, and it's not about doing so in an obnoxious way. One comment we got from Live Like a King Istanbul is, this is not the real Turkey. It's just Istanbul for wealthy people like you. This idea that living like a king isn't real. The reality is, whatever the country is, it's real for some people and not real for others. I've always been a big advocate for charity. We have featured one charity in an upcoming video. They don't all want to be on camera. We can't always find a good one, and we'll just give kind of ad hoc. But for me, there's wealthy people who live everywhere. My perspective is someone whose entire life has been as an entrepreneur. I've fortunately become pretty successful by doing that. I am a guy. I am 40 years old. I am from the United States, but have lived elsewhere for a long time. That's the perspective I come from. I don't bring a 21-year-old perspective or a 65-year-old perspective or the perspective of someone who has struggled. And so I think that, again, the point of this is, if you're a successful person, you have to realize you have options outside of your country. And I think a lot of people who have become millionaires, multimillionaires, they think, hey, the United States or Australia is the best place for me. 50% tax, that's just what comes with the territory. I don't want to downgrade my life somewhere else. You can go somewhere else and live well. I happen to think on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot less envy in the places that I go, just from people on the street, than there was that I encountered in the US. And I think the US has only gotten worse. There's going to be someone who's going to make a dumb comment. I don't think everyone making a dumb comment is local. But there is a different side if you have money in any place. And we can debate whether that's right or that's wrong, but it's what it is. Many of these countries would love for you to come. They have tax incentives. They want you to come and live there and spend money in their country. And so if you are a successful entrepreneur or investor, the kind that we work with as clients, then this can be the real Turkey, the real Malaysia, the real whatever. And in every country, there's people who have that and people who don't. If you want to learn how to work with us, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Not all of our clients choose to move overseas or live like a king somewhere else. Some of them just set up a plan B, but they are taking steps to have a life of total freedom. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply and learn more. Someone else said, this isn't how most people live. Yeah, again, you're focused on how you're going to live. And I think helping people out is an important thing. But if you're going to live well somewhere, you're going to live well anywhere. That's the point of the series. You don't have to live well in a place that doesn't value you and takes a lot of your money. And so people talk about fake luxury, fake nightclubs where the regular locals don't go at all. I had a friend once. I was afraid of going to Disneyland. Someone said, hey, let's go to Disneyland. And I asked my friend, but I'm going to such far-flung. I was in Vanuatu last month. How can I be going to Disneyland? That's against the brand. He said, you're a post-tourist. That was his phrase. You've already been to all the far-flung places. Allow yourself Disneyland every once in a while. If you're going to go overseas, you should allow yourself, sure, have some of the local cuisine, settle in with some of the local custom, be part of the scene to some extent. But there's nothing wrong with floating above the local culture and having some places that foreigners go, if that's what you want to do. That's why we show me eating Taco Bell or Wendy's in some of the Live Like a Kings, because I also want you to realize, on top of luxury, you have the luxury of having that taste of home somewhere else. And those places aren't just where you are. There's nothing wrong with going somewhere else and taking some part of your culture with you. And that doesn't mean that the places you go are fake. It means that's where you want to go. And you're never going to agree with every single person in the country, most of whom, by the way, don't care where you go. One of the issues is that places we talk about aren't safe. And so we did Live Like a King in Bogota. Someone said, Bogota's cool when you have a 2-man armed security detail and an armored Mercedes and live in a private secured neighborhood. I don't live in a private secured neighborhood. In Bogota, pretty much every building has some level of security. No doubt, we've talked about it. Statistically, places in Latin America are less safe. Now, our argument is, hey, let me show you the neighborhood where I live, which is going to be the nicest neighborhood there. And it's comparable to where you live now, because people have this idea that they're going to live in some safe suburb in, let's say, the US. But if they move to Bogota, they're going to move to the middle of the the hood. It's like, no, you're going to move to the exact same kind of environment you have, or maybe even step it up a level because you have more money. There are gated communities, guard-gated communities in Bogota, and if you want to live in one, you can. I like to live closer to the action. As to having security, we go around with expensive camera equipment, and by the way, we have an annual event, Nomad Capitalist Live, at a hotel in Malaysia, one of the safer countries in the world. We have security there too. So the security may be for people, some people just need security no matter where they go. Certainly, Bogota, you have more of a risk of having your expensive camera or your phone taken from you. So there is a bit of an adjustment. But for me, I like the lifestyle there, and it's worth it for someone. And so the point is, sure, there's more precautions to be taken in some places than others. You're already sacrificing something to be where you are now, whether you realize it or not. If you like what a place like Bogota has to offer, it's going to have pros and it's going to have cons. Our point is saying, hey, take some precautions, but you can be safe pretty much everywhere. Something that was mentioned for Live Like a King Tbilisi was political instability and people talking about Russia being next door. Obviously, there was a Georgia-Russia skirmish back in 2008, and those borders still remain. My perspective as someone who actually lives in these places is whatever your thoughts on that, that's going to impact your daily life very, very little. If you're living like a king the way we talk about it, Nomad Capitalist, you're going to have different options. Live like a king does not mean move all your money to that country, although I think Georgian banks in particular are interesting enough for part of your money. So live like a king does not mean you throw out the rules of Nomad Capitalist where you have multiple residences, multiple passports, you have different places to go, you have your money in different places. That's the baseline. Live like a king is the extra element of don't think you have to live some austere lifestyle to what we call plant flags. So I happen to think, just from a personal level, I don't live much in fear of a lot of the geopolitical stuff people talk about. I think having options prevents a lot of that. And I think people use that as an excuse to not go out there and experience the world. Listen, if you don't want any adventure in your life, if you're madly in love with your country, and if you're willing to accept whatever they give you, then the whole premise of everything we do here isn't for you. And that's okay. But Live Like a King is just about saying, here's the nicer things to do while you're there. And then in a similar vein, geopolitical risks. Crazy to live in Turkey, Live Like a King Istanbul again. Crazy to live in Turkey with the present regime. They are buddies with Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Thumbs down emoji. And again, I think people ought to be prepared in an increasingly multipolar world with homes, residence permits, and passports in different places. One thing we're seeing our clients a lot more interested in is they're from whatever country they're from, but they want an additional toehold in the West and one in the East, because they're seeing even countries that get along with everybody, like Malaysia, where we did Live Like a King Kuala Lumpur, and Thailand, where we'll have one in the near future. Those countries want to join BRICS. Why? They're more aligned with other countries in Asia, as the US hasn't really done much for them. They've kind of shifted their alliance more towards other Asian countries like China. In my opinion, I can't tell any difference in the quality of life. It's still a nice place with nice people. But the benefit there is, as the West becomes increasingly grabbing of your money and grabbing your power, I want different places. And so for me, Live Like a King in Istanbul, if you buy a property, you don't have to live there, but if you buy a property and you get Turkish citizenship by investment for buying that property, you never have to go there. But if you had to, you could. And Turkey has been a neutral player, for example, in the Russia-Ukraine war. And so, I think a country that has not changed necessarily the life in its own country, but has some friends that are maybe different than the friends of the country where you're from, or gets along with everybody, I think that's actually a good thing. Because the idea that we're just going to go down one road geopolitically and hope that that's the correct side, I don't think this is like times in the early 1900s. I think we're seeing that Western countries aren't the pillars of virtue that they'd like you to think that they are. You want to have options on both sides. Doesn't mean your values change, but it means the countries may adjust how they operate and your values may find themselves in a different place. A lot of people in the Western world right now are saying, hey, I used to have these political views, but I feel pushed out. I feel I don't recognize my country. You didn't change. The politicians, the politics, the country changed. And so I think you want different countries that have different geopolitical perspectives. That's all part of Live Like a King. But the point is, what you don't want to think is, hey, if I buy this house in Istanbul as a backup plan, that's going to be a place I don't want to go because I'm living in hell. No, you can have a nice life. Yes, the culture is a bit different. Yes, English is a little bit less spoken there. It's going to be a bit of an adjustment because you're getting something that is somewhat dramatically different, geopolitically, culturally, etc. But there could be some elements of that that could be a safe haven. I'll tell you, during the pandemic, I was a lot happier to be in Turkey than I was in countries in Western Europe. And so I think it's all about setting yourself up to where you can always live like a king. You don't want to get stuck in some Casablanca-like situation. You want to be able to know whatever happens, you're living well. And let's stop at the shame that if living well for you means drinking nice bottles of wine, let's make sure you have those nice bottles of wine in a place like Turkey where you can have them. Gentrification is an issue. This is a bigger topic in Latin America. So you had a lot of the digital nomads going down to places like Mexico and as well as Colombia. I happen to live in Bogota because there are fewer Westerners going there than places like Medellin. But we had people comment about how we're bringing gentrification. The reality is there were always wealthy people in these places. And I think that's something that people don't want to accept. Live Like a King has always existed. Our series is not about telling you where to go. It's about opening up your mind to the idea that people can live very well in other countries too. I think that people think everyone in Colombia is poor and none of them have any money. Go to Colombia, you will see some very wealthy people. Now, they may flaunt it less than people in other countries, and that's part of the equation of what you could decide. Do you want to go to a place where they're a bit more down to earth, or do you want to go somewhere where they're more ostentatious? You can choose. But there are some very wealthy people who travel all around the world, who wear designer clothes, who drink expensive alcohol, who go to, in Bogota, Pajares Salinas, where we weren't allowed to film, one of the great restaurants of Bogota. You will see high society at a place like that. I didn't invent Pajares Salinas. I just go there. And I'll tell you this, I think people like you and I ought to be proud to go places and support waiters at places like that who make more than waiters at sopas de mamas y postres de abuelos, where they're selling ajiaco soup on the cheap. And I think it's a positive thing. People who can come in and spend money. People go to La Coleccione in Bogota and buy expensive Ferragamo shoes. Those businesses need to be supported. One of the things that I think is thrilling about all the opportunities around the world is I went to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia 7 or 8 years ago, and they had just opened a Louis Vuitton store. And you'd think, who has any money for Louis Vuitton? Now, apparently not enough people, because the store ended up closing. It was one of the rare stores that closed. But to me, that's the kind of progress that I'm excited to see around the world. And the point of Live Like a King is that's happening. There is a Louis Vuitton store at Andino Mall in Bogota. People are shopping there, and there are some very wealthy people. Adding a few of us who aren't from the country to come in and buy up property in wealthy neighborhoods that were already wealthy only helps, especially in countries where there's a bit less liquidity in the property market. People who want to sell their property, they should be able to do that. So, people, I think in some of these countries, they like the idea that they can go and move somewhere else. What's fascinating to me about the world we live in is, some people want to move to the US because they think it's some beacon of opportunity. Some of us want to move to Colombia or Georgia or Malaysia because we see it as an opportunity for a different reason. There's wealthy people going regardless. And if we're not going to criticize people moving to the US to take jobs in construction, let's not criticize people who are moving into wealthy neighborhoods. It's an ecosystem in and of itself. And if you're looking at this, understand that ecosystem exists. I think it's fascinating, and I'm proud to contribute to the fact these countries are going to become wealthier as more wealthy people have wealth in the country. One more comment we've gotten is this Live Like a King seems very materialistic. Isn't it about more than money? Isn't life about more than money? And the answer is life is about more than money. What I find a lot of times is wealthy people agree with that. There's far more than money that's of value to them in life, and yet it gets projected onto them by people who don't have as much money, but maybe would like to have money. Hey, I'm jealous about living like a king, so you must only care about money. Everything we talk about at Nomad Capitalist still stands. from a strategic point, you want personal freedom, you want lower taxes, you want a great lifestyle. But you should also want to be a good person. And yet, we had someone in my company say, don't come to me and tell me about your intentions. Good intentions are the baseline, or as Instagram calls it, the bare minimum. I don't want to hear about your intentions. I want to hear about the results. And so everything that you would do in your country, whatever being a good person, whatever having freedom, whatever is important to you, take that with you. That's the baseline. But realize that on top of that, you can have a good life. We all do want different things, but I think that you probably imagine you can go pretty much anywhere in the world and have an austere or frugal lifestyle. In the same way that we don't show Asian food carts in Kuala Lumpur because you know that exists. You've imagined that exists. Live Like a King is about breaking down stereotypes. You were probably less aware that you can go to the 57th floor of the 3rd Petronas Tower and you can dine on some of the best caviars there are. Now, yeah, you're going to pay more for it than you might pay somewhere in the West, but you're also going to pay less to live in Kuala Lumpur. You're going to pay a lot less in taxes generally. You're probably going to be left alone to a greater extent than you would in the West. And so, yeah, sure, paying a bit more for caviar, that's the price of admission. There is no free lunch. But realizing that exists doesn't mean it's about materialism. Again, it means that there is an option out there. And listen, for me, I like to work very hard. I'm extremely dedicated to my business. I know a lot of entrepreneurs are. And when I go out and do something besides just sitting and scarfing down a burrito, I want it to be impactful, and I want to know the places that I go have those opportunities for me. So that's how you live like a king. I've been doing it for years in places all around the world. It's something that you can lever up and lever down, and it's something that if you are that successful 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur, you should go out and experience. One place you can experience some elements of that is our live event, Nomad Capitalist Live. We have some of the best information about the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle and strategies. We have networking with some of the most interesting global citizens and speakers. And we have what is truly a show where you're going to see just how great it can be to live life in a place like Kuala Lumpur. So go to nomadcapitalist.com/live. Learn how you can join us at our next live event. It's a perfect opportunity to check out one of the favorite places in my life to live like a king.